I noticed the cane before I noticed the body. It didn't stand, it lay, as if gravity itself had been insulted. The Atlantic was quiet that morning, too quiet for a ship the size of the Lucienne. The air hung heavy with fog, the horizon blurred into a single shade of gray. It was the third day of the voyage from Lisbon to New York when the peace shattered with a knock, frantic, urgent, human. At precisely 7:40, the steward burst into the captain's quarters, breathless and pale. "Sir Philip Garvey," he stammered, "in his cabin. He's gone. I was there by accident. My name is Theo Larson, a book restorer by trade, a reluctant traveler by nature. I'd come aboard seeking quiet, paper, and the kind of company that left you alone. Instead, I found myself standing at the edge of a locked door on Deck A, staring at a thing that didn't belong there, a cane. It was lying across the carpet like a crossed-out word, dark wood polished to a mirror, its silver handle carved into a fox's head, eyes sharp, teeth bared in eternal amusement. Inside, Sir Philip lay sideways on the bed, still in his evening jacket, a brandy glass on the nightstand half full, the surface undisturbed. The curtains fluttered with the slow breath of the ocean breeze. He looked asleep, the kind of sleep that ignores noise and reason. The doctor arrived minutes later, muttered about heart failure, and covered the body with the efficiency of a man who has stopped asking questions. But even as he spoke, my eyes kept drifting to the cane, wrong, misplaced, somehow louder than the death itself. By mid-morning, the captain gathered the few of us who might know something. We met in the saloon, all velvet and polished brass. The fog pressed against the windows like an uninvited guest. Miss Violet Marlowe, 50th a day, once a darling of the London stage. She carried herself like applause remembered her. Her gloved hands were steady until someone mentioned Sir Philip's walking stick. Then, a tremor, small, involuntary, telling. Mr. Martin Drake, all sharp edges and restless shoulders, claimed to be in medical supply. His knuckles were bruised, his smile absent. Rumor had it he quarreled with Sir Philip over politics the night before. Captain Roger Kane, immaculate, unreadable, the kind of man who treated storms as scheduling errors. He admitted Sir Philip had lodged a complaint about security concerns the previous evening. He was a cautious man, Kane said. Never went anywhere without his cane. Miss Joanna Grace, no more than 25, lovely in a rehearsed way. She called Sir Philip her benefactor, a friend from difficult years. Her eyes lingered too long on the captain, not long enough on the corpse. As the questioning dragged on, I shifted in my seat and something crinkled beneath me. A ribbon black silk about 6 inches long, faintly scented with mint tobacco. One end bore a smear of pale wax, candle wax, or perhaps sealing wax. I pocketed it quietly. Outside, the fog thickened until even the horizon disappeared. The Lucienne sailed blind through a sea of mirrors, carrying the living, the dead, and one piece of evidence no one else had noticed. And somewhere between Lisbon and New York, a murderer was counting on that. Murderers don't panic, they edit. By the time the ship's bells marked noon, the fog had swallowed the horizon entirely. The Lucienne felt like a floating corridor with no doors, the kind of place where footsteps mattered more than direction. Captain Kane ordered that Sir Philip's cabin be sealed. But at sea, walls are only as loyal as hinges. When I returned later that afternoon, escorted by the ship's doctor who still refused to call the death unnatural, the cane was gone. Not misplaced, not moved, gone. The steward swore he hadn't entered. The door had been locked under the captain's seal, yet the thin strip of red wax now bore a hairline crack, invisible unless the light caught it just so. I examined the bedside table. The brandy glass stood empty. A faint ring of moisture marked where it had once been full. The air smelled faintly of candle smoke, a note that didn't belong on an electric ship. "You see," said Dr. Bell, folding his arms. A fainting heart, a sudden collapse, and idle curiosity turned dramatic by confinement. You're reading ghosts into steam. Perhaps, I said, but I've never known a ghost to steal a cane. In the saloon that evening, conversation fluttered like trapped birds. The captain had confined the first-class passengers to common areas for their safety. No one said murder, but everyone meant it. Miss Violet Marlowe sat at the piano, playing soft, hesitant notes that never quite reached melody. When I approached, she stopped mid-key. He wasn't a kind man, she said abruptly, but he was useful. Useful men shouldn't die inconveniently. Her reflection in the polished lid looked younger and frightened. I asked if she'd seen anyone near Sir Philip's room. Only the porter, she said. The tall one with the bad leg. He carried a cane too. There was no porter with a limp aboard the Lucienne. I checked the roster myself. Later on the promenade deck, I found Miss Joanna Grace standing alone, her fur collar damp with mist. She turned when she heard me, eyes sharp under fatigue. "You shouldn't ask so many questions," she said. "People might think you're writing them down. Would that frighten you? It frightens everyone who's hiding something." The wind tugged at her hair. Beneath the glamour there was steel. "Sir Philip wasn't the only one who received letters," she said softly. "He just thought his secrets mattered more." "What letters?" She looked at me long enough to decide, short enough to regret. "Ask your captain," she said, and disappeared down the deck stairs. I found Captain Kane in the navigation room, studying a chart that hadn't changed in hours. He didn't look surprised to see me. "She talks too much," he said without turning. "Then you've been listening," he smiled faintly. "A captain always listens, especially when he's supposed to hear nothing." I told him about the missing cane. He frowned, more from formality than shock. "It will turn up," he said. "Objects do at sea. And if it doesn't," he glanced toward the compass, "then we find who wanted it gone." That night, unable to sleep, I returned to the saloon. The piano lid was closed, the chairs neatly aligned. On the carpet, half hidden beneath a leg of the grand piano, lay a small smear of silver polish and a single thread of black silk, twinned to the ribbon I had pocketed earlier. It caught the light like a signature. The Lucienne rocked gently under a sky too thick for stars. Somewhere below deck, a door latched softly, deliberate, careful, the kind of sound that keeps a man awake. And above the sea, where fog erased every line between direction and deceit, someone was moving through the corridors with a cane they shouldn't have, and a reason no one yet understood. Everyone lies differently. The trick is to listen to the silence between their words. Morning brought no sun. Only a sickly pallor, like daylight, had lost its courage halfway to the sea. The crew whispered of bad omens, the passengers pretended not to listen, and Captain Kane announced that we'd reach Halifax in 2 days, weather permitting. He didn't mention murder. He didn't have to. At breakfast, Violet Marlowe wore morning black as if she'd rehearsed it. When I sat beside her, she poured tea with unshaken hands. "Did you know Sir Philip well?" I asked. "Well enough to know he kept no friends. And yet someone visited him last night after the stewards were dismissed. I heard voices. A woman's soft, angry." I waited, but she didn't elaborate. Her eyes flicked toward Joanna Grace, seated across the room, a handkerchief twisting between her fingers. When I approached Miss Grace later, she met me with a look that was half defiance, half fear. "You think it was me," she said. "Everyone does, but I went to my cabin before midnight. Ask anyone." "I intend to," I said, starting with the anyone. The Lucienne's hallways felt narrower that morning, the kind of tightness that comes when truth starts breathing too close. On Deck B, I nearly collided with Mr. Martin Drake, who looked even less like a medical supplier and more like a man who hadn't slept. His knuckles were raw again. "Accidents happen," he said before I could speak. "Doors, handles, tempers. Or Kane's, I said. He froze, then slowly, you think I took it? I think whoever took it didn't do it for the silver. He smiled thinly. Then you're cleverer than you look. Be careful, clever men fall overboard more often than drunk ones. By afternoon, the fog thinned enough to reveal water the color of pewter. I walked the promenade, trying to fit people to motives. That's when I noticed the deckhand sealing off cabin 12. A faint chemical odor drifted from inside, polish and something sharper. What's wrong with that cabin? I asked. The steward swallowed. Maintenance, sir. Broken light. But when he turned the key, I saw the truth. No darkness, no repairs. The room was immaculate except for one detail. An umbrella stand in the corner, empty but still wet at the base. And beside it, pressed into the carpet, a small indentation, oval, the width of a cane tip. Someone had stored it here. Recently. On the desk lay a torn page from a letter, the ink smeared but legible. You said it would only be a game. He's begun to suspect. No signature, no envelope, just a half-truth that smelled like guilt. That evening, Captain Kane called a casual dinner, though there was nothing casual about it. Every fork clinked like confession. Miss Grace avoided everyone's eyes. Mr. Drake drank too much. Violet Marlowe excused herself after one course, and the captain kept watching the doors. Halfway through the meal, the ship rolled suddenly. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make glasses tremble. Something metallic fell behind the captain's chair with a dull clatter. We all turned. It was a cane. Sir Philip Garvey's cane. But when the captain picked it up, I saw it wasn't the same. The silver fox's head was tarnished, its eyes dull. A fake, clever, rushed, meant to convince the inattentive. Kane's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened on the handle. Seems our ghost has returned something he didn't take, he said quietly. Later that night, in the ship's library, I laid the fake beside the ribbon and wax I'd found earlier. They belonged to different worlds, one cold and deliberate, the other hurried and nervous. Whoever forged this cane wanted distraction, not deception. And then it struck me, why hide the real cane unless it still contained something? I held the imitation up to the lamplight. The fox's head was hollow, the base threaded. Unscrewing it revealed nothing but air. Yet I knew then that the true cane had been more than a prop, it had been a container. Somewhere on this ship, a secret was still sealed inside silver, and the sea, patient as sin, was waiting to keep it. The difference between truth and performance is that one leaves fingerprints. I didn't sleep. The hum of the engines sounded different that night, too measured, too aware. I stayed in the ship's library, the false cane on the table before me, watching the lamplight slide across its dull surface. It was perfect enough to fool anyone who'd never seen the real one. But I had. And Sir Philip Garvey wasn't a man to carry anything counterfeit. The question was, who'd had access to something so precisely wrong? By dawn, the fog had thinned, though the world still looked bruised. I went to find Violet Marlowe. Her cabin door was ajar. Inside, disorder disguised as tidiness. The trunk half-packed, perfume bottles rearranged, and on the vanity, a letter addressed but never sealed. To whom it may concern, I cannot bear the silence any longer. He said the cane was his insurance, that it held proof of everything. If they find it, I am finished. The signature was a hurried scrawl, V.M. I was still reading when the floor creaked behind me. Miss Marlowe stood there, pale as linen. You had no right, she whispered. Neither did he, I said softly. What proof did he have? Her voice cracked. Not proof, blackmail. Letters, photographs, names. He kept them inside the cane's handle. The silver fox wasn't decoration, it was a lockbox. And you knew. I gave it to him. For a moment the ship tilted. Maybe it was the sea, maybe her guilt. We were both in Paris then. I thought it would buy silence. Instead, it bought power. He used it against everyone, me, Drake, even the captain. We all paid our share to stay invisible. And now, She met my eyes with something that looked like surrender. Now someone stopped paying. I found Captain Kane on the bridge. The fog was lifting, a horizon of gray glass stretching forever. He didn't turn when I entered. "You know, don't you?" I said. He exhaled, slow and heavy. "I know that Garvey was about to ruin half this ship's reputation before we reached port. He had a ledger, names, debts, affairs, but I didn't kill him. Yet you knew about the cane." He glanced sideways. "He showed it to me once. Said it was indestructible." "Was it?" His jaw tightened. "If you're suggesting I replaced it, be careful, Mr. Larson. A ship is smaller than it looks." Below deck, I found Martin Drake in the smoking lounge, surrounded by empty glasses and a deck of untouched cards. He looked up as I approached. "Tell me," I said, "what was in the cane?" He smiled faintly. "The same thing in every secret, a transaction. You were his partner, his customer," he said. "Garvey trafficked in discretion. And when I couldn't pay, he wanted something else." "What?" "Information about the woman." "Miss Grace?" He nodded. "He said she wasn't who she claimed, that her name wasn't even hers. I told him to drop it. 2 nights later, he was dead." I left him there, the smoke curling around him like confession. On my way back to the upper deck, I passed cabin 12, the one that had hidden the cane. This time, the door wasn't locked. Inside, the air smelled of ozone and metal polish. The umbrella stand was gone. On the desk, a single object waited under the lamplight, the real cane. The fox's silver grin looked almost human. I lifted it carefully, the weight familiar, balanced. The threading at the base turned smoothly under my fingers. Inside the hollow, no documents, no photos, no ledger, just a small brass key. And on its tag, engraved in neat script, E. Ward. I didn't know the name, not yet, but I knew what it meant. Someone wanted me to. Outside, the Atlantic rolled like a heartbeat. The fog was gone, but the ship had never felt smaller. And somewhere on board, one of us was holding the lock that key would open. You never find the truth by chasing it. You wait until someone trips over it. The brass key lay on my palm like a dare. E. Ward, the name engraved on its tag, meant nothing to the passenger list, the crew manifest, or the ship's registry. Whoever Ward was, he either never boarded the Lucienne or had made sure his name never appeared. I carried the key to Captain Kane. He studied it as though it were an old enemy. "Never heard of Ward," he said finally. "But that tag looks American, Boston make. We took supplies there last month. Some crates were sealed with brass locks like that." "Any missing?" His silence was the answer. Below deck, the cargo hold was colder than the sea itself. Condensation hung from the iron beams like slow rain. Kane's lantern picked out rows of wooden crates stamped with fading lettering. Ward & Co. Shipping, Boston Harbor. Half the seals were broken. One crate was open, empty, and smelled faintly of ink and lacquer. Inside, nailed to the lid, a torn label read "Property of Sir Philip Garvey." The captain swore under his breath. He was smuggling his own evidence aboard. I looked closer. A false bottom had been pried loose, the nails still warm to touch. Someone had been here recently. Beneath it, only a scrap of brown paper remained, scrawled in Garvey's hand. "If the sea takes me, it takes them too." By noon, gossip had reached every deck. The passengers had turned from frightened to ravenous, each theory louder than the last. Miss Grace stayed in her cabin. Violet Marlowe stopped pretending innocence and began drinking openly. Martin Drake prowled the corridors like a man rehearsing alibis. At lunch, he slid into the seat across from me. "You think I care who Ward is," he said. "Garvey was the blackmailer, not me, but you should ask the captain who paid him first." I frowned. "You mean Kane? Who else commands enough silence to make a body disappear at sea?" That evening, the weather turned again. A thin rain hissed against the glass as if trying to get in. I found Miss Grace in the observation lounge, staring at her reflection. "You've been avoiding me," I said. "I've been avoiding everyone," she replied without turning. "Then perhaps you can stop avoiding yourself. Who is E. Ward?" She froze. A single muscle in her jaw moved, then very quietly, "My husband." "You're married?" "Was," she said. "He drowned 2 years ago, off the coast of Boston." "And Sir Philip knew?" She nodded once. "He supplied the investigation, or what passed for one. My husband was carrying government documents, plans, names. He said if anything happened, someone would know where to look. In a cane. In something smaller," she said, glancing toward my pocket. "The key." Before I could ask more, the Lucienne shuddered. The engines faltered, then steadied again. Over the loudspeaker came a calm voice, too calm. "All passengers remain in cabins, crew to lower deck." Captain Kane met me in the corridor. His coat was soaked, his face set. "We've had a break-in. Cargo hold again." When we arrived, 2 sailors stood by the opened crate I'd examined earlier. The false bottom lay splintered beside it. The space beneath was empty now. "The keys match," Kane said grimly. "Gone." That night, rain turned to fog again, thicker than before. Somewhere within it, a ship's bell rang once, a sound that didn't belong to us. I locked the key in my cabin drawer and sat awake until dawn, knowing what Garvey had written was prophecy. If the sea takes me, it takes them too. And now the sea was listening. Every secret is a confession that learned to hide its face. The fog outside felt alive, as though the Atlantic had leaned close to listen. The Lucienne creaked and sighed in the dark, a beast carrying too many ghosts. When I knocked on Captain Kane's door, there was no answer. The knob turned easily. Inside, the room smelled of tobacco and something bitterer, regret perhaps. On his desk lay a logbook open to a page that wasn't nautical. Columns of names, amounts, notes, some crossed out, others circled. Violet Marlowe, Martin Drake, Joanna Grace, even my name. Next to it in Garvey's neat hand. "We'll break under pressure." Footsteps in the corridor. I shut the book too late. Kane filled the doorway, eyes hollow from a night with no sleep. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should this," I said, tapping the log. "Garvey's handwriting, your ink." He smiled without warmth. "A man learns to copy when the truth needs help surviving." He kept 2 ledgers, one to extort, one to protect. I took the second. To protect whom? He lit a cigarette and stared at the flame. "Myself first, the ship second." At midday, the weather cleared, cruelly bright. Violet Marlowe sat alone on deck, hair loose, eyes glassy. "He's gone, isn't he?" she murmured. "Garvey." "No, the captain. I saw him throw something overboard last night, heavy, wrapped in oilcloth." "The ledger, or a man," she said. I went below again into the belly of the ship. The cargo hold reeked of salt and metal. Near the empty crate, water seeped through the boards, not from the sea, but from above, dripping in measured intervals. Beneath the puddle, something glimmered. A brass lock cracked open, and beside it a single scrap of oilcloth. Inside, damp but legible, a torn corner of paper. Ledger copy, Ward & Co., delivery manifest attached. Ward, the name on the key. I ran back to my cabin, tore open the drawer, and took out the brass key. Its teeth were oddly shaped, wider at the base, not for a door but for a chest or box. I turned it in my hand and saw faint numbers etched along the shaft. 12B, Deck B, Cabin 12. The cabin was dark, the curtains drawn. The air stank of polish and fear. I knelt beside the desk where I'd found the cane before and tapped along the panels until a hollow note answered. One sharp pull revealed a small compartment, its lock broken, its contents gone. Except one thing, a silver fox's head, detached, the same that once crowned the cane. Inside the hollow mouth, folded tightly, was paper sealed with wax. I broke it carefully. To whoever finds this, Ward & Co. are not merchants. They are couriers, government contracts, illicit transfers. I was meant to expose them. Instead, I profited. This is my confession. If I vanish, follow the key. P. Garvey. The paper smelled faintly of creosote and sea. His last defense and his last sin. When I turned, Joanna Grace was standing in the doorway, pale but composed. "You found it," she said softly. "You already knew," she nodded. "He wasn't blackmailing me. He was helping me bury my husband's trail. Edward Ward was no shipping clerk. He was the man Garvey meant to expose. My husband. And when Garvey tried to sell that confession, someone silenced him before the key could surface." "Who?" She smiled faintly. "Who always survives a sinking ship?" The engines groaned beneath us like thunder. Somewhere outside, the bell rang once low, final. I didn't answer her, because I already knew. Justice isn't balance, it's buoyancy, what floats when lies finally sink. The morning the truth surfaced, the Atlantic was calm, as though resting after what it had swallowed. Captain Kane was missing. His cabin stood open, bed made, boots gone. On the desk lay a folded note in the same blunt hand that signed the ship's manifests. "No man can captain two vessels, one of iron, one of guilt. I'll keep to the quieter one." A line beneath, drawn with the steadiness of decision, ended in a smudge of salt. The crew said he must have jumped before dawn. But when I looked through the porthole, I saw a single black shape drifting far behind, not a man, not quite. Something wrapped, something deliberate. The ocean kept its promise of silence. Violet Marlowe confessed that afternoon not to murder, but to theft. She had taken Garvey's cane before it could be found, terrified her own letters were inside. When she realized the handle hid only a key, she'd thrown the cane into a cleaning barrel. Someone else retrieved it later. She cried without dignity. Martin Drake admitted paying Garvey, but only in fear. "I thought he'd ruin me," he said, "but he only wanted names." "Whose names?" I asked. "People who'd already paid." Joanna Grace didn't cry. She sat by the rail, hair whipping like a flag in the wind, her face made of porcelain and resolve. "You think Kane killed him," she said. "I think Garvey died because he thought secrets could be catalogued. Kane just proved him right." "He tried to protect me," she murmured. "No," I said. "He tried to protect his ship. You were collateral compassion." She looked at me, unblinking. "Then let the sea judge us both." By dusk, the Lucienne reached Halifax. The authorities took statements, examined the compartments, the broken cane, the brass key. They found Garvey's ledger sealed inside a waterproof crate chained beneath the lifeboats. Its pages were dry. Its names were not. Every passenger had a line beside them, a debt, a threat, a motive. And near the bottom, one last entry. E. Ward confirmed lost. Successor, J. Grace. It wasn't her husband's secret, it was her inheritance. She'd carried the false identity to escape it. Garvey had made sure she never could. The magistrate read the ledger twice and said there would be no trial. "The sea took its due," he said simply, "and left us paperwork." When I left the ship, the dock smelled of iron and new beginnings. Violet vanished into the crowd. Drake boarded a train to New York with eyes that would never close easy again. Joanna Grace, or whatever her name truly was, walked toward customs without looking back. I followed, not to accuse, but to confirm. At the exit gate she paused, then turned just enough for me to hear. "Garvey was wrong," she said. "The truth doesn't sink, it drifts until someone mistakes it for debris." Then she was gone. I kept the brass key, not as evidence but as reminder. It opens nothing now, but it weighs more than it should. Some nights when the wind carries the smell of salt and metal, I imagine Captain Kane standing on his quieter vessel, ledger in hand, reading the sea its own confession. And I wonder whether the ocean ever answers.